Okay, well, if I remember what I wrote in Meetup at all, I said we'd start with showing the modules that were involved. So I'm going to dip on into the extend section here, and I am running this locally, so it's not super fast, so bear with me on that. But we collapse core. I did install the admin toolbar, not related, but I can't imagine running a Drupal website without the administration toolbar. Just seems insane to me not have the drop downs. So I did install the ECK entity construction kit. And quite honestly, I actually did that for another purpose, but because it was so useful and applicable for migrations, I decided to go ahead and include that tonight. But it was actually part of a conversation that Shook ended up actually doing a whole presentation on. So anyway, we installed the ECK entity construction kit. Won't take a deep dive into that, but we'll definitely look at it. And I didn't install any of the examples modules for migrate, but I did install the migrate mod. These are all now contrib modules. These are not in core. So migrate module, migrate Drupal UI, migrate plus, migrate source CSV, because that's what I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to actually demonstrate importing data based on CSV files, and migrate tools. And you can see the only ones I have active are migrate plus CSV and tools. I didn't even install these because I didn't need them for what we're going to do tonight. Okay, so that's it in terms of the modules that would be required to do this, the way that we're going to do it. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and dip really quick into entities, not entities themselves so much, but just show you that I am, unlike Ashua, could not create an entity without a tool like ECK. So it's a nice user interface that allows you to, pretty quickly and easily use the UI to create and manage entities. Okay, so in preparation, I did this in advance, which was probably a good thing because, like I said, I don't think that many of us here tonight really need this education. So I'm building it from starting from scratch and installing all these modules would have been a waste of your time. So, but we will quickly look at the bundle list, just so we can see what I created in terms of this entity. The bundle is a contact. I called it a contact, and managing fields on that. And what's really interesting, and for Garrett's sake, it should be noted that one of the favorite things about content types is that they're fieldable. So I was under the assumption that entities were not fieldable, but that's not true. You can absolutely have fields on entities. And in fact, you can even add fields, much like content type, after the fact. So I guess I should say one of the beauties of the ECK, the construction kit, is that you have this user interface for creating entities and not having to do it programmatically. Would that be an accurate statement? Mm-hmm. Okay, you better be paying attention. You are my backup. Make sure I don't say anything incorrect.
It's okay, things can be incorrect.
You can also use Drush to create entities. It just answers a series of questions.
Mm-hmm. Would you care to elaborate just a little bit on that for the sake of the recording?
And that's a scaffolding.
I
have a command line.
Of course I have a command line. I wouldn't even deserve to be here if I didn't have a command line.
So Drush, Drush gen colon entity, I think.
With or without a space?
No space, just gen colon entity.
Now, I'm not going to create one. I'm just going to press that to see what we get. Not a command.
So you have to run Lando Drush?
Oh, because I'm using Lando. I'm so sorry.
So we'll ask you questions.
Well, this will be really cool. Actually, let's just do it. Nothing like a live demo.
Mm-hmm. Well, that might not.
Oh, dang.
If you just type Lando Drush, you can see what commands come up.
Sorry, I need to install the update so we'd stop getting all of that nonsense.
If you scroll up through it, sometimes you can see like generate section. It might exist, otherwise you might need to install the plugin or something for it.
Yeah, I don't even see it. EFG doesn't
There
even
used to
exist.
be the Drupal shell, so there was Drush, which has been around for a very
Okay.
long time,
Let's just pretend.
and there was
Forget I said.
the Drupal shell, which was a
No,
thing
but it's
that
still
was
really nice.
pretty locally.
Yeah,
And that had a bunch of scaffolding stuff in it for sure.
okay. Well, we don't get to do that live demo, unfortunately, but we get it that there's more than one.
Live demo, not doing a live.
Yeah, well,
It's exciting.
I think the point we can take away from that is that there is definitely more than one way to do this. And the more that you know, the technical aspects of it, you can do that without a UI. But since I rely heavily on UIs, I took the easy route. So, and you know what? You never know. We might have you come back and demo that for us one day. But anyway, for my contact entity, I created. I wanted to know what company this contact works for. I wanted to, I needed a unique. Actually, I found out later you don't actually need a unique ID. Drupal will give you one, but I created a unique ID anyway. An email field, so we would know their email and first and last name. That's pretty darn basic for a contact, but again, this is just a demonstration, not reality. And I will not lie that I did use ChatGPT to create my comma separated files. I'm proud to say that ChatGPT is a beneficial tool. I use it on a fairly regular basis. Little sidetrack here. It's really great at creating comma separated files for you. So when you need data to do a demonstration with, it'll whip up 40 contacts for you, or 40 speakers in this case, really quickly for you. Anyway, getting back. So that was my super fast overview of ECK. All right. So in a content types, this out of the box, as we talked about before, built in, baked right in. You can add content types. All right. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but I will show you the content type that I created, just like I did the entity. We'll look at the fields for a guest speaker. So contacts and guest speakers. You can't tell that I work for a university, can you? I just randomly pick these things. And if this really were an entry level kind of presentation where everybody was really new, I would actually insist that we go back to ChatGPT, create another comma separated file, build a new YAML file for the Drupal configuration, and create a new content type or entity and actually import it. But for the sake of expediency, I'm not going to do that because I have a feeling that the audience that I have with me tonight is going to have more fun talking than they are of me demonstrating. So anyway, very similar type of thing. The fields I chose, area of expertise, because speakers need to have something to talk about. Email, contact, first name, last name. I'm sorry, full name, first name, last name, and a short bio. Okay. Not that it isn't obvious, but let's go ahead and look at the, and I'll stick with the content type right now rather than the entity type, but it is kind of important to pay attention to your column heading names because you do need them for importing your configuration into Drupal to get the migration working. Okay, so and it's also important to note, because I kind of jumped ahead, that you couldn't migrate anything into Drupal unless you have the content type or the entity created first. It has to have it, and it has to have all the fields in order for the migration to get the data from the comma separated file and put it into the database. You can't do that part on the fly. So you know what I mean? Like, what you can do on the fly, though, remarkably, is build taxonomy. You do need to create the taxonomy category. Is it a category? I'm sorry?
The vocabulary.
The vocabulary. Thank you for that. See, I knew I was going to need some help to get through this. You must have the vocabulary name, because otherwise it doesn't have any place to import it. But you don't need anything other than that. It'll generate all your taxonomy for you as well as your content. Okay. And just as an interesting side note, I actually, in my YAML file, I made it plural. So I put the wrong vocabulary machine name in. I added an S to the end, and it created the taxonomy anyway, but you couldn't get to it because there was no vocabulary by that name. So it went ahead and created all the vocabulary items. It created all the taxonomy, but you couldn't get to it in the UI. So I had to actually delete my existing vocabulary, create the new vocabulary, and magically all my taxonomy items were there. Okay, I could have demonstrated that. It was actually pretty fun to do that. Anyway, getting back. All right, so I hope I'm not forgetting anything. So once you have your fields created, all right, wait, I'm going to stay here for just 1 second. Sorry. It's very important that you notice the machine names, okay? Because in order to import, you'll need to import them to the right machine name or you won't get your data. It'll populate all the stuff that you got right, and it will not populate stuff that you don't get right. So it won't necessarily just fail miserably. It'll just get half your data in your content type. Which is what's really cool is Migrate allows you to update, so you can actually add fields later, import the same spreadsheet as you did before, but just add a new column to it, and it'll update it. So you can make mistakes and actually recover from them, I guess is the point there. All right, so now we can go ahead and dive into the code itself. Okay, wait, and I'm sorry, let me back up. I took the easy path, okay, for this, because if you didn't have the YAML file, a sample YAML file to start with, you would have to know how to write all this code, right? And you would have to know each and everything that's important to make this work. I'll admit straight up, I had sort of a quote unquote template to look at. So because of that, if anybody actually wanted a copy of this, just so if they want to play with it and try it, I would be more than happy to post this sample YAML file that I did somewhere so that you can get at it and see and just play with this yourself and do some easy testing. One thing that I was actually fascinated by is that even though I'm going to import content types or I did import content types and entities, it actually, there's nothing about these files that actually specifies that, like Drupal doesn't care, right? It's just as long as you tell it where it's going and you get all the names right, all the machine names right, it's going to do the job. Like there's no difference between the information at the beginning of this file between my entity and my content type. And I thought that there would be, because it even has something in here called, let's see, CCK plugin method null. And that's looking at the entity migration. It says CCK, sorry, not ECK. Plugin method is null. So in other words, there's just nothing in this YAML file that tells it we're importing entities versus content types. It doesn't care. It's just as long as everything else is right. Okay. So, really quickly to note, if you were writing this from scratch, you would not have a UUID. Okay. The only reason that mine do is I actually went backwards. I exported it after I imported it because I wanted to make changes to it. I wanted to update it for the demonstration, and I didn't. It's okay to use the UUID if you're updating your configuration. So again, just for the recording, for people who are pretty new to this sort of thing, this YAML file is nothing but building configuration in Drupal. So before I go through the code, let's just look at that configuration really quick, okay? If I go to structure migrations, these migrations are configuration, okay? I didn't do this in the UI. I can add a migration group, but I can't build an entire migration in the UI. They have threatened or promised to do that one day. It does not exist. The only way to create these configurations is either programmatically or with this YAML file to import the configuration, because we could have a whole other presentation on Drupal configuration, because all configuration can be exported to YAML files and should be if you're synchronizing and keeping your site up to date and things like that with configuration. So these are configurations. And I didn't have to actually do these separately. I only did them separately for the sake of this demonstration. I did a content type and an entity migration, but quite honestly, they could have both been in the same migration group. Doesn't really matter. I didn't have to separate them, but I did it just for the sake of the demonstration. So if I list migrations, it shows you that I've already imported 40 of the 40 that were in my spreadsheet. Okay. So in order to make this whole thing work, you have to have a spreadsheet to import, which I showed you earlier. But that file has to be in the file system somewhere, and I'll show you that in code. All right. The path to your source has to be a path that you can obviously either FTP to or SSH to, or quite honestly, you could actually put it in Site's default files if you wanted to. So you could actually add it as a file type, a meme type that you can upload, and you could actually, like if you had just really piss poor hosting and you didn't have SSH, for example, you could work around this problem even on a $3 a month hosting site by just uploading the site in the Site's default files and import from there. You could still do it, is my point. Of course, I think you might. No, you could do it that way.
I
So
think Migrate Plus, or there's a module that lets you upload a file. And it'll, so long as all of your mappings and all that stuff is correct, you can use that to migrate in content.
So that's cool. So you can actually upload your import file from the UI with an additional module. That's what he just said.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I already did this, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm working locally, so I just copied the file into my modules folder. We picked that. And the only reason we picked the modules folder actually is because for the original demonstration, this site's on Pantheon. And it was just the easiest way to do it. But I've done it where it's in Site's default files, and I just create a folder called CSV files or whatever inside there. Okay. So migration group is important, okay, because that is my migration group, does need to match, okay, my migration group, okay, needs to match. And it's a machine name, not the friendly name, not the human readable name. The label's not terribly important, but this source is important. This is the YAML is saying that the source is going to be a CSV. This is the path of the CSV. Delimiter tells you it's a comma separated. And then in this particular case, my IDs were the contact ID. I was asking Ashok about this earlier, about what the significance is of this fields. And basically what you're doing with these fields is you're telling Drupal that you're going to be importing this data. It's going to have this name, and it's going to be using this label. Okay. But the real magic actually happens in this process. Did I state that correctly?
Did you repeat that?
I said the reason for this field section is not so much that it uses it for processing, but you're basically telling Drupal that these are the fields that we're going to populate, and these are the names of those fields, right?
No, so
That's not exactly right.
Drupal
That's
is using these fields.
okay.
So if you look in the process section,
And speak loud because
You
my
can-
microphone's all the way
Sure.
over here.
so if you look in the process section, you can see what if you go back to your YAML.
Oh, sorry.
So
Yeah.
in your process section, like for example, if you look at line 44,
Uh-huh.
you see how it says field first name,
Right.
and then you have first name
Right.
as something.
Right.
So Drupal needs to understand what is first name.
Right.
And so it's looking at that field section
Ah,
where you
okay.
have name and label. And so it sees, oh, there is in the CSV file, there's going to be a column called first name. And I'm going to be able to get my data from that column, and it maps to field first name in my content type.
So there you have it.
So the field name is declaration.
Pardon? The field name is declaration of what the source file consists of.
And if you leave it out, you won't be able to use it.
That's right.
Exactly.
You won't get any data.
Kinda, I mean, there are ways to kind of
Well-
get around, it, like you can say field 0 and it'll sort of work its way around it, but this helps make make someone that's looking at your system and see like, oh, this is how this thing maps out.
Right.
If, quick question, if I may. On the field, let's say you put it, you like mistyped it in the process or in the field area, will it still continue processing every other field or will it error out?
It
It depends
might
on-
error out,
Yeah.
actually. If
On the first one, right?
yeah, earlier on, I gave another scenario where it will actually run and you'll just be
Yeah, I
missing that
That's what
data.
you're saying, right?
But there are cases, and I want to say it's when you get a field name wrong, that it will actually import nothing. And in that case, I made that mistake, so I can actually show you by going into,
And the other thing, well, the other way that things can happen is if your field is required in a content type. And if you try to import and you have not matched it correctly, then it'll error out because it's like, there's no data in this field, I'm not gonna save anything. Because it is erroring out at that level of like, as part of the validation.
all right, let me get this to error only. Okay, so here's exactly what you just asked. I had an invalid name field, and it tried to insert and it said I couldn't do that, so I'm bailing out. So it knew there was 40, it saw 40 in the spreadsheet, but it imported nothing, it imported 0. So when that happens, when you run your migration, which I am going to show you that how to run the migration, although we don't have anything to actually migrate unless we create a new comma separated file. But when you go to migrate it and it runs, and you get the progress bar that goes across, and it says, and it goes back to the screen, it says nothing was imported.
Yeah.
You want to look into your error log, basically.
That's what I was getting at.
Yep, and then find out what you did wrong, because it'll tell you right there. I tried to insert this into, but I didn't find this on this one item. It wasn't there, right? Okay, so that was a great question and a great diversion into what can happen when you get things wrong. Because sometimes it'll just import the data and you'll be missing one field. All of them will be empty for some reason. And other times, and I don't really know what the difference is, why one would fail and one would not. But Ashu alluded to, this is where the magic happens. This is the process, right? So, and each one of these is a process. And some are multi-line and some are not, because some involve more things than others. So if you learn nothing else from migration, this is kind of the meat and potatoes. This is the heart of it right here. Okay, for my full name field full name, that's my field name for my content type in Drupal that I created for my content type. For the full name, I'm using a plugin. Every single item that gets imported is using some sort of plugin, right? And in this particular case, I'm using the plugin for concatenating. And I'm saying, take the source from my Excel file and import the first name and the last name, concatenate them together and create populate the field full name, okay? Actually, that was for this one. Field full name is plug concat source full name last name. I'm not really sure what this was for.
This is for the title.
The title. Thank you. But why do I have the title for the first name last name?
Well,
That's
you
probably
have
a
the
mistake.
title because you have a content type.
No, I know, but why first name last name? I think that's a mistake, but it worked anyway. Anyway, if you're not concatenating, it's really just straightforward. First name of the column in your spreadsheet or in your comma separated file, right? It's just 1-to-1. Populate that field in my content type with the value in that column. And so that's how those go. And then for my body, that is a 1-to-1. So that's Drupal's that's the every content type by default comes with a body. So I'm just saying, put the short bio in the body. Now, I don't know if you'd really want to do it that way if you were creating a content type, because then you don't actually have any other place to put other things. So you might want to leave the body for other types of information and put the bio into a new field called body or called bio. I was taking the short road because it doesn't really matter for this demonstration. It's not a real website that's going to actually ever run. But again, so this is a really good example of a little bit more sophisticated plugin usage. Okay, I'm creating taxonomy. All right, and in my spreadsheet, okay, notice that for the field, sorry, wrong one, for the field of expertise, all right, area of expertise, some of the values, I didn't do it in because I used, sorry, bad example, because I used ChatGPT and I didn't ask ChatGPT to do it, but I'll explain the code anyway because it would have worked. But just pretend that in my spreadsheet that some people had more than one area of expertise, all right? And those areas of expertise were comma separated, right? So let's say my area of expertise was politics, real estate, equity, and inclusion. I had like 4 areas. I can speak on a number of topics. All right. This is the value and the power of this particular, even though it's not using it in my case. I'm using a plugin called Explode, where it delimitates each of the values by their comma, grabs that source from the field, from the column in my spreadsheet that's called area expertise, uses the plugin entity generate. So it's not only grabbing each one of those values within each cell of my spreadsheet, but it's going to create a taxonomy item in my vocabulary. Okay. Entity generate, that's the plugin that generates anything, whether it be taxonomy or otherwise, but in this case, it's taxonomy. But the entity type in this case is a taxonomy term. The bundle is area of expertise, and the value key is the name. And I can't really explain that. And the VID, which is the something ID, but I don't remember. What's that?
Vocabulary ID.
No, I think VID is used for many things. But anyway, not super important. It works. The destination is so sorry. I wanted to stay just really quickly wrap this up about the field of expertise. But basically what's going to happen here is as long as the vocabulary area of expertise exists, for every value in that column, even if there's multiple values in a single cell, it's going to create a new taxonomy item that someone can be an area of expertise in. So when you're building your view and you want to be able to sort your view, I want to find speakers that can speak on equity and inclusion, the equity, diversity, inclusion, right? Even if you made each of those individual, typically they'd all be one, but you could do that and then build your view and sort. Let's say you had 1,000 speakers, right? And you wanted someone to speak on something. You don't want to spend too much time filtering that. So that's why vocabulary is really a good item for that. You can search freeform text, but what if you get the text wrong? What if you have a typo? You know what I mean? So taxonomy is just a really great thing to use for views because it makes an excellent way to filter things, and importing them is not that difficult. And you can do it and people can actually have more than one value, which is really cool. And when it builds the entities and you see the entities or the content types, you'll see like, well, let's just go look at one, right? Because I already did the import, right? So let's just go ahead and go to the home page, just get out of here, and we'll go to guest speakers. All right, it created a simple view based on the data that I imported, right? And unfortunately, none of these people have more than one area of expertise. But when you go in here, if this person would have been politics and real estate and whatever, they would have all been listed because the import would work for that. It actually, on this part where it's going to the destination, oops, didn't mean to collapse that. The plugin is entity node. We're creating nodes in this case. In this case, the destination is entity. Okay, so I said there was nothing about this that was specific. Earlier, I said there was nothing specific that separated entities from content types. I just remembered I was wrong, and there it is. Where were you to catch me on that? Sorry, slapping a ship on the knee. So that's what's telling it where it's going. And in this case, it's going to a node, and the default module is guest speakers and no dependencies. So that is kind of how it worked. And now what I'll really quickly do, and pretty much wraps this up, I'm going to go to migrations, and I'm just going to show you that if I was going to execute this migration, you can import, and you have some additional options, which is to update. So as I was saying earlier, if you decided to add some more fields to your common separated file, you could run an update and import. Just overwrite your file in whatever folder it's in, run it as an update, and it'll just add all the new data. Just don't forget to go back to your content type and add that field, or your entity and add that field, because if you don't add the field, it's not going to be able to import. It's going to fail. But you, again, create your content type or your edit entity, then import your file, and it'll work. And in this case, all I would have to do is hit execute, and it would execute. I mean, I'll execute it, and you'll see it'll go through the motions, but it's not going to do anything because it's already done. It processed 40 items, but it created nothing. It updated 40 because I told it to update, but it didn't update anything because there was nothing new in the file. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Unless I forgot anything. Did I forget anything is the question.
I don't think you forgot anything, but I just want to point out in your YAML file, and I think you kind of have already anyways, that like, this is one of like, the part that you have for the field area of expertise, like, that's definitely a very powerful area of things within Drupal. The fact that you can chain multiple plugins to kind of do different things for a given as part of a given migration to ingest your content. So like, in your first example, you have a concat, which is, you have two different fields, you just kind of need to lump them together.
Right.
And then, that becomes part of your one singular field that you have.
Right.
In the case of your expertise, you have a taxonomy term. It's like, well, I have multiple values. So first I need to split it up using, because I know I've separated by comments. So
Right.
let me do that. And then let me have it run through,
Right.
and generate the taxonomy.
Right.
If you wanted to, you could even throw in there like because there's a plugin for trimming it. So like,
Right.
your,
So-
like when you're exploring your content, like you have comma space, right?
Right.
You could just have a comma. Your next plugin could be trim, which will just trim down that content. And then the next one is,
Yeah.
bring it in as a taxonomy term, or it could even become a different type of node or a user or whatever else.
Yeah.
And then you could even have it do something else after that. Like, so long as you're playing with Drupal's migration plugin system, you can keep chaining a whole bunch of different things one after the other for it.
So Oscar, hang on to that question just 1 second, because of what he just said, just 1 second, I promise.
Mhm.
So I just wanted, because I knew this would come up in conversation, I just wanted to show you that even if you just do a quick Google search or whatever your favorite search engine is for migrate plugins, Drupal migrate plugins, it'll bring you right to this page of core migrate plugins, right? These are all the core plugins. So again, you saw concat, right? We use that, but there are so many plugins, all right? Entity exists, iterator. I mean, he named a few. And then if you don't have core, you can install additional plugins by using some other advanced plugins. And I won't even get started. There's so many. I mean, the list just goes on. And there's more than this. This isn't even all of them. This is just a subset of the many, 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 many plugins. And if you're not happy, you can even write your own.
Hence the right your own.
Yes,
That's
you
what
can
I'm
write a
saying.
plugin.
You write your own plugin.
You can.
Yeah.
You can absolutely write your
Yeah,
own
if you
plugin.
wanted to make it easier for your, site builders, like instead of them needing to know like, the 4 or 5 things that need to get changed, you could have your own Uber plugin that goes through and does all of that stuff yourself, right? And then they just need to know that one liner, and then that's, then that's part of your migration processing.
One other thing you can do is pseudo fields. Pseudo fields, also,
Aliases.
you want to explain pseudo fields?
Oh, no, like aliases, do you mean, or like
So
super
if you
users?
go back to your YAML file. And for the first line, or the first thing in process title, instead put that pseudo, make that pseudo full name or something.
Like that full
Yeah,
name?
under pseudo underscore full name or something. it doesn't matter, it's, you know, I just use sudo to show that it's a pseudo field.
I see.
And then colon, and then, put everything under title, under pseudo full name,
Right.
the delimiter too.
All right, I'll catch it after, since I already copied it. The delimiter. Got it.
Now. Now get rid of everything after title, everything inside title. Yeah, right,
And line.
including delimiter,
Yes, the number.
okay. And then copy pseudo file name or pseudo full name. Okay, and then after title, put space, single quotation mark, @sign,
Yeah. That's right, okay.
and then at the end, a single, is there, yeah, a single quote. So, the pseudo file name will be set to the concat of those two names, and then you can use it later on. So-
I don't think I spelled pseudo right. How do you spell pseudo?
Oh, no, it can be anything. That's what.
Yeah.
we're trying to say,
Oh.
right?
Okay,
It doesn't, yeah,
because I'm looking at that, I'm like, I don't think it's PS.
But I think what this means is that, like, you know how you said that field full name and
Right.
title seem to have the same stuff in it?
Right,
You could just make a singular thing,
right,
right? And then your title has @pseudo full name, and then your field full name also has @pseudo full name. So then they're both reusing the same little block of
Right.
configuration that.
Very
you can find
cool.
out there.
love that. That's great for the recording. Thank you.
no problem.
I have a question,
Sure.
but it's just a comprehension question, if you wanna continue.
No,
this.
no, go ahead.
So this YAML file, when it runs, it's reading the CSV file and it's creating a bunch of content,
Yes.
right? And what is the content type that it's creating?
Okay, so,
Right at the bottom, so if you go back.
oh,
to-
sorry. Yeah, so right at
You
the,
see-
at the bottom,
you see
on the
line
content type,
16:8?
it's entity node,
So it's creating nodes.
right? And the
And-
entity one, the entity YAML is creating entities. Entity,
Yeah, and you
colon,
see-
content,
Right, so that's
entity.
what I was gonna ask, so is this creating a content type?
That's creating entities.
So. That's right, the
wait,
word
let me-
is
let me
super
back up.
loaded. The word is super loaded.
But
Okay,
I just
So the
thought,
first one,
I
Right.
thought you created a content type and then you can create contents of that type.
yes, we did.
So-
So hang on, I know exactly what he's saying. Let's look at content, my list of content, right? So if I look at my content and I say what type, let me just look at guest speakers, right? Because again, entities can't be used here, but we will look at that in just 1 second. Okay, so if I do that and I filter, right? And all I've done is filtered out 1 or 2 pages I have. This is what we imported. You asked
Right.
the entity colon node, when it imported, when it ran, when I hit that execute button and it went through that progress bar, all that was created.
Right.
All of you, this was empty before that, okay? The ECK content, the ECK toolkit, okay, structure, ECK types, right? If I go here and I do content list, this is virtually the same thing. This is not baked into Drupal, only content types. So looking at Drupal content is out of the box. Without the toolkit, I wouldn't be able to do this. But with ECK toolkit, I can look at the content that I imported, all right? And this is the results of that YAML file. What I did not, I just remember what we forgot to show. I did not show him configuration. If you go, the way this works is, if I go to configuration,
it's in development.
thank you. As I fish around, I'm going to go to export, right? But so if I go to export a single item, right? And I go to migrations, right? And I select one of my 2 migrations, right? So I will choose the content type since that's the one we're looking at. This is what you're looking at in my code editor. I copied and pasted that over, but I had to have one to get started. So as I said in the beginning, I had a template. I cheated. I had a template file that I used and modified it to fit what I needed to fit. But I started out with adding a single item and just pasted the YAML file in here. But it's very critical that if you're going to paste in something that's brand new, it doesn't exist yet as a configuration, because you remember, I can't emphasize it enough. He made it this point early on, is super critical. We're importing configuration. This is all stuff that Drupal uses to do things, right? You can't have a UUID if it doesn't exist yet, because if you do that, it's going to say not found. I'm not finding that. I can't update that. I didn't have it. So you would have to delete that and leave that blank on your very first import of a new configuration. You don't want to assign it a UUID. You want to let Drupal do that.
So go back to the stuff, but now I would say go back to the part where you actually generated it with sort of the UID.
Okay.
Because now I think that will go full circle to this question.
Okay. So if I go to structure, migrations, and what's great is no matter how much we muck about in my code editor, it doesn't matter, because that file that I can go, every change that we made, I can go export, copy and paste that back and erase everything that we did, because we're just messing about with it. But if I go to my, we'll do the entity migration just for the sake of it. All right. And you wanted me to hit execute, or you just want to look at it first?
So if you click on, can you click
On the
versus-
migration at first. Okay. So,
Yeah.
right. I guess this is a really another great thing I missed, right?
That's what I'm talking about. You went over the UID part. You said,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So once the configuration is in, you can look at your configuration here of your migration. So this is the overview, the migration group name and the description, which is not terribly important. It's telling you what the source is. That's the source file, right? And the column names. So this is it absorbed everything that was in my YAML file and put it into Drupal. And Oscar was astute in having me show that to you, because now it's going to make some sense. Okay. The process is basically, where am I getting it? Where's it going? What plugin am I using when I do that? Right. So in that, this shows you the plugin. I'm going to concatenate first name, last name, or I'm just going to get this and put it in. You know what I mean? And the destination is, and where's it going? Well, in this case, I guess that's not terribly important. Oh, it's just going to the entity.
It's
Sorry.
going to the contact entity.
The contact entity, right? So that's the destination.
So you got your data. And he said, oh, I need to go ahead and I know I have to use UI to do 101 to put into Drupal. And then he showed a YAML file where he produced that. And then he cooked that into the migration to run it. Right. Yeah.
Right. So we did that. We just did that for the entity type, but if we go to destination over here, you'll see that it says node instead.
Yeah.
So everything that you saw in the YAML file is now in Drupal. Drupal knows about this migration. It can run it over and over again. All I would have to do is go to and I'm running locally, so I can just show it to you this way, which is you'd have to SSH into your server, obviously, if this was running on a website. But for the LA Drupal, in my web modules folder, I dropped my files. See, there they are.
But can we go back to the code for a second?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Someone's actually learning something. This is great.
I'm learning that.
Did you learn anything?
yeah.
Oh my God. I am so pleased.
I don't use the entity editor.
I am so happy. I even got that on recording.
I don't.
So can we go to the file to the left, content type migration?
Yes, of course.
This is the one that we looked at line by line.
Yes.
And it's telling you what fields to grab from the CSV and where to put them in the content that you're creating in Drupal.
Correct.
But then the file to the right, entity migration YAML,
Uh-huh.
what is this? Is this?
So remember, what Rick said is that, there are two different migrations happening,
Uh-huh,
right? One is to the node entity type,
uh-huh,
and that's the content type migration.yaml file. So
Hmm.
it is creating nodes of type
Hmm,
speaker, guest speakers,
hmm.
right? And then the second one, again, loaded term entity migration, which is it is migrating content into this contact entity type
Hmm.
Called contact.
called contact.
I see, so you load it first into a node and then you load it into contact.
Well, he's just showing an example of like, you can load it as a node if you want, or you can also load it. Because again, the power of Drupal is like, you can create all of these different types of entities.
Right,
you know,
Right,
different tables or whatever, because it's generalized enough behind the scenes, like Drupal is going to save it to this other, wholly other type of, data
Right.
set.
I could have done this
Backend.
whole demonstration with one or the other
Yeah.
and just said, you can create entities or you can create content. I did
Yeah.
both because there was another conversation on another night about entities and I was
Okay.
going to show just the ECK kit, but we
Right.
never got around to it because
So you don't need to do both, you can do.
you don't
one-
absolutely do not need to do
Gotcha,
both.
gotcha.
And that was where we started this whole conversation before the recording,
Okay,
was that
I see.
there is value to entities and there is value to content types. One of those values being that when you have really novice users who are going to maintain a website, it's kind of problematic to use entities because that's more complicated for them. It's easier for them to create content types, but there is value in entities. Even on a website that's going to be maintained by novice users, they just probably would never be responsible for maintaining entities. That's just something that's out of their scope of work, right? Perfect example of that is we used entities for personnel. And our migration ran every single night. And it talked to LDAP, Active Directory. And it said, let me compare what I have for all of my faculty and staff in the faculty and staff directory and compare that to what's in LDAP. Oh, I found something new. I'm going to update that. Oh, this is no longer in LDAP. We got to delete that. I got something new. I'm going to create a new one. So that migration was a little more sophisticated in that it was doing updating, deleting, adding all on the fly every single night. Nobody touched it. So the faculty directory and the staff directory was always up to date with whatever the situation was with hiring and departures. You know what I mean? All with migration. That was, and I could actually show that to you right here if we really wanted to go down that road, because that migration in my yeah, we're not going to do that, but I could show you that migration, and it's a very long file because it gets into more involved stuff. I don't know if that part of it is in the migration though. The part where it would do updates, additions, removals every night. Like, I don't
It
know if
might
you,
not do all of them together, like it might do updates and creates, because
Right.
that's what Migrate excels at, like
right,
bringing in and
Right.
updating content, not so much on the deletion part.
right,
So that might just be something that you have running
Right.
separately that then, right, like, is this user in?
and
my
I'm not even
LDAP?
sure it
And if
used
it's not, then
migration,
it
to be
will-
honest with you. I'd have to
Yeah.
look that up.
If it's using LDAP, then it might just be a thing that the LDAP module does as a custom thing
Yeah,
for that.
I'd have to look it up, but it was, it was,
But I mean, again.
And we didn't even
conceptually,
delete
the ideas
them.
are the same. Like, I would say I've worked with a lot of different CMSs and frameworks and all of that stuff. And I feel like Drupal and the way it handles migrations are some of the best I've seen out there anywhere. And I think of it just as a conceptual thing, even of like, how do you think about in big production systems, like they're called ETLs, which stands for extract, which is extracting content
Right.
from your external system, transform, which is basically massaging it to fit your destination system, and load, which is loading that data once it's being processed into the new system. And migrate is a perfect example of what it's doing there. You have your field section, which is basically defining what you're extracting. You have your process, which is transforming all of the data that you need. and then you have destination, which is where it's loading all that data into. And it is all defined, and before it was all in PHP and stuff, and that was still really good. But here you can see it very clearly defined in that same type of capacity. And this is like, if you're dealing with other systems, you're kind of dealing with the same concepts, but Drupal makes it really easy for people to digest.
Yeah.
Like those concepts,
And-
like it
and-
is absolutely amazing.
Had I had more time,
Hmm.
I was actually going to demonstrate how to migrate content from one website to another. Because you can use this same tool. You can use the Drupal configuration to migrate literally from content type to content type if you wanted to. So let's say you had a really old website built on Drupal 7 or 6 or 5 or 4, but there was some really great content there that you didn't want to lose. Events maybe, or news, right? You had this archive of really killer news. Why would you want to not bring that to your new website, right? Why lose that archive of news? All you need is your Drupal database, and you can use the migration tool, any export of your database, and you could migrate from that database and create all those nodes or whatever they may be. They could be entities, not nodes, but whatever they are, you could create them and add your view and have your news going all the way back to your website that was built 15 years ago.
Which I'm really excited because I haven't done that in a while. I'm doing a D7 to D10
Yeah.
migration.
And- And people think, like, if it's going to be too hard to actually upgrade a site from 7 to 10, like, then what do we do, right? Well, the worst case scenario is you migrate your really good stuff to your new website, that and you just build it from scratch, but you don't have to lose all that content. You can migrate it forward, and without the trouble of trying to upgrade a site from 7 to 9, or 10, because that is like I don't even know if it doesn't even exist, right?
Also, migrations came around, so
Specifically to solve that problem.
because the change of how the code worked and how everything was stored was so fundamentally different between Drupal 7 and 8.
Right.
People just started to think about, let's not worry about an upgrade path for this, and let's just think about it more conceptually as creating a new Drupal 8 site and then migrating
your
all
content.
its pieces
Right.
into
Yeah.
the new thing.
So
It has its own sets of issues, but you can conceptually, at least you can start thinking of it as, okay, I'm gonna have a brand spanking new site. Maybe instead of importing everything, maybe I'll just import some of the content that I have.
right, the
And
good
then I
stuff.
can just focus on, rebuilding the whole system the way that I want it to be.
Right.
That I might build it in 2023 versus, how I might have thought about building it back in 2015.
So, and I'll just point out that that is probably the more common use case than what I demonstrated, the comma separated file. But the reason I chose the comma separated file was it was a lot easier. It was something we could do in a single night. But that use case is very much the scenario that more than it that's the use case that most people use migrations for more than any other reason. But in my case, and I can actually, I'm not sure if I'm logged in, but so what? Yay. Okay, so this was a site I built because, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Because the advancement team had, so sorry. I usually use a mouse, so I'm not, why is that not working?
Live demos, man.
It's like frozen.
I see the thing spinning, so it
Oh,
might just be.
okay.
taking a long time to load.
Well, it shouldn't. Okay, sorry.
It's local, just say it's local.
So advancement team had hundreds of speakers that faculty could hire to come in and give a lecture on any of the topics that we teach at the business school, right? They maintained all of that data in an Excel spreadsheet for so many years. And they came to me and they said, I don't know if you could help us, but it's excruciating. Like, if we want to find, like, you really have to know how to use Excel if you're going to start trying to find a group of speakers that can give a lecture on a group of things. So I use the taxonomy many times. What industry sector, you can stack these filters. Topic of specialization. See, now my demo all of a sudden seems very familiar, right? Where are they located, right? Because you might want to find somebody who's local to Los Angeles if you want them to speak in person, right? And even a keyword search to look through their bios for keywords, right? And find any one of this very long list of speakers and narrow it down. And again, I used extra modules inside of Vue to do things like being able to link within a field to their bio, to things like that, okay? And because I'm an admin, I actually get their Marshall contact information, which is not actually available for everyone, because they don't want just anybody to reach out to the speaker directly. They want to go through. So anyway, a contact. So that was a legitimate purpose for a CSV import. Like, they came to us with a massive file and they said, and we even within that, we have events, and it would really be great if we could list events and filter it by topic so we could see what they've given lectures on. Like, does anybody ever given a lecture on blockchain? I actually went to a blockchain conference today. It was fascinating. None found. So there's nobody in here that has this topic specialization of blockchain. I'm not going to give a demonstration on the site. I really was just only dove over that to show you how comma separated absolutely has value. Like, that's a totally legitimate reason to import data. But more often than not, you're going to be migrating data from one website to another, and that's a little bit more complicated, but
Do you
a lot
want
more
to
powerful.
Drush?
I love Drush, but I don't know that I have everything installed that I need to give any sort of a good demonstration. But
I think for, like, in your case, you're talking about websites and stuff. And
yeah,
in the case of where I work now, like, we do a lot of streaming related stuff. So we work with companies that have like massive amounts of video and stuff like that. And so they're typically providing content to us in what they call MRSS, which stands for media RSS. And so that consists of, like, you know, the path to the file, and then it's just one giant or multiple giant XML documents that have that kind of data in there for the stuff. And that's where Migrate comes in really handy for bringing in all of that content and pushing it into like a video or show or episode or whatever else that we've defined for bringing that stuff in.
And when you say migrate there, you mean the migrate module?
The Migrate module, yes.
and
We
I
have a lot of stuff that's built on top of the core Migrate module that's there for being able to put everything together.
And I don't think I necessarily installed every available migrate module. There, you know, if there's specific things you want to migrate, there might be a separate module you install in order to accomplish that. But yeah,
that's an example of what I said before.
Should I stop the recording?
No.
Okay, good. I didn't know where you were going with that.
If you learn one thing in Drupal, then you have to learn 50 others. For example, if you learn migrate, you have to learn a ton of migrate plugin module.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to learn. Yeah, I can tell you that the very first time we wrote a migration, or I say we, there's no mouse in my pocket. The very first migration that I wrote from scratch, that one for the speakers, I had to write that one from scratch. So I started out tonight saying I had a template, but the very first one I had to write, and trust me, I did not know what I was doing, and it was not fun. Because you just be missing one line and the stupid thing won't work. And then the error message doesn't exactly tell you, oh, you need to declare X or whatever. It was like, So I had to look at a lot of examples to figure out what I was doing wrong. But man, once you get that first one, and like I said, I'm happy to share mine, because if you're ever gonna import a comma separated file, don't write all that code from scratch. Take mine and then just modify all your field values and add any additional plugins that you need to do anything additional that I didn't already demonstrate for you. You know, I did the explode and concatenate and create taxonomy. So there's a pretty good, you get a pretty good sampling of what you can do with it, but there's a lot more that you can do, obviously. But like I said, you can go to that migration page and look at all those plugins, and you can find a plugin for just about everything.
You might want to show the source code for one of the plugins. What's done.
How easy is that to do?
Core, just the root of the site, core, web core,
Modules.
modules, migrate. Source, plugin, migrate, last one, and process, and then the easiest one, like concat.
Wow.
Way down there.
It's
I
deep,
didn't
but you
even
can-
think about doing that. That's really cool.
It's deep, but like you can see how it's like the example part's really cool, right? I haven't seen that before either, so thanks for pointing that out. But you can see like that's when you're writing out your migration YAML, it's giving you an example of just how it should look.
Look at that.
And you'll
That's
scroll down,
right.
it'll be real nice.
You're talking about it
Yeah,
here,
this whole part,
Yeah.
but then does it tell you, so you're concatenating here foo and bar? But
Yeah.
does it show you what that looks like? Once
Well,
it's
see,
in-
like, it's even telling you what it's gonna do. This
Yeah.
will set new text field to the concatenation of foo and bar
Uh-huh.
source values. So if foo property is Rosa and bar is Parks, the
Right,
new text field will be Rosa Parks.
I see, then we have
That's
the
really-
limiter.
That's really fucking cool, actually.
Well, keeps growing.
Now you got an F word on my recording.
Recording.
That's fine. So,
No one's gonna watch it that can't handle the F word, but
If it keeps growing, you'll see that. it's really-
the actual code, yeah. That's all the code.
so that's why these plugins
But
are
see
so
the
powerful.
problem? It throws an exception if it's not an array. So you can't feed it just a random variable,
Right,
it has to be an array,
right.
so.
But an array can be,
Well,
an array can be
your
one,
row-
one item in the array though, right?
Your array is the two different fields
But I'm
that you're,
saying,
one or more
if
different
you
fields.
wanna
that
say
you're-
like have a scalar and append it to an array, this won't work.
It, I think it might, unless you're saying like a scalar and an
Well,
array.
I forget the details, but I had to write something to work around the fact that it threw an exception.
Interesting.
So I had to write my own, like append scale, append scale
Got it.
to array. And because this thing wasn't working, something similar to it wasn't working.
I see.
So this is saying if the delimiter has been set manually, set it to that, otherwise set it to empty string.
Yeah, so like, if you set your delimiter to be a space,
Right,
right, then it'll do Rosa space Parks.
right,
Otherwise, if you don't set it, then it's just going to literally just join them together.
Right.
Without any spacing.
And you see the row,
Elfstone error.
the row argument. The row argument.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Row, no, it's
There's value, migrate executable, and then row $row.
What line number?
64.
Ah,
row has a get source method that returns the input row it's working on. So you can look at the actual raw data. And then, you might want to actually use the raw data.
very cool. Hi. Who'd have thunk? The power of meetups.
Yeah.
I was keeping it basic. We took a deeper dive. Very nice. Should I keep recording?
Up to you.
Well, I
Are we
think,
done,
I
or
think
are we-
we're good for migration. I don't think we're done, but I think from the recording of migrations, I think we're done. Unless anybody has anything else they'd like to add that's significant for
Well,
the,
if you use Drush, what you can do is have one command, you know, and it together command, where you input,
Excuse me, thank you.
where you do a partial config import of your YAML file. Then you stop the migration, then you roll back the migration, then you redo the migration. So that way you can just, you know, run that command over and over as you're working on the migration.
well, that would be a little bit more of an advanced topic
Yeah.
anyway, so I'll stop the recording and maybe on another